The moment I walked into my living room, still in uniform, still smelling of sand and gunpowder, I knew something was off. My heels clicked against the hardwood floor as I moved closer to the sound. Soft music, rhythmic, seductive, out of place in my quiet home. I wasn't supposed to be home for another week. My deployment in Iraq had been extended, and I hadn't told anyone I was flying back early. It was a surprise. A surprise for my husband. A surprise for my best friend, Clara, who'd promised to check in on him while I was away. But the surprise was mine. What I saw next ripped something out of me. Clara. My Clara. The woman who'd held my hand when I got my first deployment orders. The woman who threw my bridal shower. The one I called my sister, even though we didn't share blood. She was dancing, no grinding, half naked in my living room, in front of my husband. My husband, Nate, was sitting back on our cream-colored couch, shirt unbuttoned, his hand casually holding a glass of whiskey like this was some kind of show. Neither of them heard me. They were too busy. Too deep in whatever twisted world they'd created in my absence. I didn't scream, I didn't cry, I just stood there, military cap still on, war still in my eyes, and watched the woman I trusted most betray me in real time. She wore the silk robe I had left behind, the one I used to wear every Sunday morning. It barely covered her. Nate laughed at something she whispered, his eyes never leaving her body. It took every ounce of my training not to react, not to let the rage erupt. I had led hostage rescues, commanded battalions, survived explosions, and lost soldiers under my command. But nothing prepared me for this moment. This kind of betrayal doesn't come from an enemy. It comes from people you love. Clara turned, flipping her hair, and finally saw me. She froze. Nate followed her gaze. His face went white. "Bailey?" he stammered, scrambling to stand. I thought you weren't coming back until next week?" I said calmly, my voice cold as steel. "Yeah, that's what I told you." Clara clutched the robe around her body, her face painted in panic. This isn't what it looks like," she said. "Oh, how cliché. The betrayal always starts with that line, doesn't it?" "You're half naked in my house," I said, stepping closer, unblinking. "How many ways can I interpret that?" Nate tried to reach for me, but I raised a hand. "Don't," I said. "Don't you dare touch me." Clara began to cry. "It was a mistake. We didn't mean for it to happen. We were just lonely." "Lonely?" I laughed, sharp and hollow. "You were lonely while I was dodging bullets in a war zone? You were lonely in my house, with my husband, wearing my clothes?" She sobbed harder. Nate just stood there like a statue, guilt dripping from his skin. I wanted to scream, to throw things, to collapse, but I didn't. Because in that moment, I realized something chilling. This wasn't their first time. The way they looked at each other, the ease, the comfort, they hadn't just made a mistake. They had made a choice. Again and again. I didn't come home to my family. I came home to a performance. And since they loved performing so much, I decided I would give them an audience. "You like dancing, Clara?" I asked, my tone even, dangerous. "Then keep dancing." "What?" she whispered, confused. "Keep dancing." I pulled out my phone. "Because tomorrow night, you'll be doing it again, but this time in front of your parents." Her eyes widened in horror. "You wouldn't." "Oh, I would," I said. "You see, Clara, I'm not just some housewife who cries in the kitchen. I'm a major in the United States Army. I've brought down warlords, and I promise you, I will make you regret the day you ever thought I was too far away to notice." She stepped back, shaking. "Please, Bailey, please don't do this." "You did this," I said, pointing to her, then Nate. "Both of you. And now, you're going to learn what it feels like to be humiliated, to be stripped bare, not just of your clothes, but of your lies." I turned around and walked out, leaving behind the wreckage of what used to be my life. The storm wasn't over, it had just begun. My name is Bailey Monroe. I'm 34 years old. And I used to believe that loyalty could survive anything, even war. I'm a major in the United States Army, with 13 years of service under my belt. I've served in Afghanistan, Iraq, and Syria. I've led operations that never made the news, but changed lives in ways I'll never be able to explain. I've crawled through sand, watched brothers die in my arms, and delivered justice with trembling hands. But back home, in the place that was supposed to be safe, I was the last to know that the real battle had already begun. I met Nate, my husband, in college. He was charming, soft-spoken, a little awkward, but sweet. I was the one with ambition, the one chasing a military career while he settled into graphic design and freelance work. We moved in together after graduation, married young, and he promised he'd support me wherever my career took me. He always said he admired my strength, my discipline, the way I could walk into any room and command it. But I should have seen the signs, the subtle insecurity when I got promoted, the way he avoided talking about my deployments, the guilt trips when I'd miss anniversaries or holidays. He never said it out loud, but I could feel it, that need to be needed, to be admired, to be the center of someone's world. I just didn't realize he'd go looking for it somewhere else. Then there was Clara. Clara and I had been best friends since we were 16. We met at a high school leadership camp and bonded over our shared love of justice, our no-nonsense attitudes, and our matching tattoos we got on a rebellious Friday night. She was the kind of friend who'd show up at 2 a.m. with ice cream after a bad day and punch anyone who broke my heart. We called each other soul sisters. She was there when I left for basic training, and she was the first face I saw when I came back. After every deployment, she'd move into my house for a few days, help me readjust, unpack, cook. She said she liked being useful, especially since her own career as a yoga instructor left her with a lot of free time. I thought she was doing it out of love. Looking back, I can see how blind I was. Nate and I had been trying to conceive for over a year. Every time I came back from deployment, we'd try. The last time I came home, we thought it had worked. The pregnancy test was faint, but it was there. A pink line. I was going to be a mom. I told Clara first. She cried, hugged me, said she couldn't wait to be Aunt Clara. That was 2 months before I walked in and caught her dancing for my husband in the robe I wore the night I told him we were pregnant. I haven't even had time to grieve that loss. Because yes, I lost the baby. A week after I found them, I started bleeding. The stress, the trauma, it all came crashing down. I went to the ER alone. Clara was gone. Nate never showed. I sat in that cold hospital room and listened to the doctor tell me what I already knew. The baby didn't make it. And that's when I knew. I had spent years fighting wars for my country, sacrificing time, safety, and eventually even my own child for people who didn't deserve me. They didn't just betray me, they broke me. But they underestimated me too. Because Bailey Monroe isn't just a soldier. She's a strategist, and I don't lose wars. 3 weeks after the night everything fell apart, I got an invitation. It was printed on thick, expensive paper, the kind that whispered elegance. Gold foil lettering, white embossed design, and Clara's name right at the top. Clara Ray presents Rise and Radiate, an evening of empowerment and healing. An evening gala, funded by her yoga studio, held at the Belmont Estate, a private, sprawling mansion used for luxury charity events and elite social gatherings. The irony was blinding. Clara, the woman who danced half-naked for my husband, was now hosting an event about female empowerment and healing. And she had the audacity to invite me. The old Bailey, the one before the betrayal, would have ripped the invitation in half and thrown it in the trash. But not this Bailey. This Bailey saw an opportunity. Belmont Estate wasn't just any venue. It was a historical mansion turned event space, perched on a hill just outside of town. Marble pillars, crystal chandeliers, a grand ballroom that could hold 200 people. Everything about it screamed prestige, exclusivity, vanity. The event was invitation only. Press would be there. Donors, influencers, all there to praise Clara for her work in the wellness community. I stared at the gold-embossed invite for hours, turning it in my fingers. Then I made a call. "Bailey," said Alex, my old college roommate and current event coordinator at Belmont, when she answered. "Wow, it's been forever." "I need a favor," I said. "And I need it quiet." I told her everything. Not in full detail, just enough. She didn't ask questions. She just said, "I've got you." The plan began. Over the next few days, I watched from a distance as Clara promoted the gala. She posted Instagram stories of her twirling in white linen dresses, talking about spiritual cleansing and forgiving the past. It made me sick. Even Nate was invited. His name appeared on the donor list online. Apparently, he'd generously contributed to the cause. Of course he had. They were selling the narrative, healing, unity, growth. But no one knew the truth. Not the press, not the donors, and definitely not Clara's parents. See, Mr. and Mrs. Ray were strict Catholics. Old-fashioned, conservative, and obsessed with appearances. I remembered how Clara used to whine about how judgmental they were, how they never really respected her yoga career, how they wished she'd become a lawyer or a teacher instead. But most of all, how much they idolized me. "They think you're a damn saint," Clara once said. "The army girl, the hero. They compare me to you constantly." So I invited them, through a third party, of course, a lovely anonymous RSVP under Bailey Monroe and guests. They didn't know I was coming. They didn't know who invited them. All they saw was an elegant card, promising an evening of grace, gratitude, and healing, hosted by their daughter. Perfect. The night of the gala, I wore black. A fitted satin gown, high slit, military medals tucked into my clutch. My hair was pulled back tight, not a strand out of place. No makeup, just red lipstick and eyes that didn't blink. I arrived fashionably late. The ballroom was stunning, gold drapes, floating candles, a string quartet playing something delicate. Clara stood near the stage, greeting guests in a shimmering ivory gown, her curls falling perfectly, that fake serenity glued to her face. When she saw me, her smile cracked, but she recovered fast. "Bailey," she said, arms out like we were still friends. "You made it. I wasn't sure you would." I stepped forward, let her hug me, felt the way her body stiffened when I whispered, "You didn't think I'd miss your big night, did you?" She pulled back, her eyes scanning the room, searching. For what, I wasn't sure. Maybe for Nate. Maybe for her parents. Maybe for a way out. "Tonight's about healing," she said quickly. "Let's put the past behind us." "Oh, don't worry," I said softly. "That's exactly what I planned to do." And then I saw them. Mr. and Mrs. Ray walking in through the main doors, their faces glowing with pride. I watched them hug Clara, watched Clara fake her surprise, and watched as they took their seats, right in the front row. Showtime. Nate wasn't always a villain. At least not the kind you'd spot right away. He didn't raise his voice, he didn't cheat with strangers at clubs or text other women in the middle of the night. No, his betrayal was quiet, subtle, slow like poison, dripping into the cracks of our marriage while I was thousands of miles away fighting for something bigger than myself. He was the kind of man who liked being the good guy, the supportive husband, the one who smiled for the camera during homecomings and sent flowers to my base on my birthday. Everyone said he was a dream. "You're lucky," they'd tell me. "Nate really gets it." But he didn't. He didn't understand the silence I carried home from war, the sleepless nights, the discipline, the pride. He didn't know what it felt like to be the only woman in a unit of 30, yet constantly proving yourself. He didn't care to learn. And when I tried to explain it, to let him in, he'd smile, nod, and change the subject. I should have known he was drifting, but I was too focused on the missions, on surviving. And Clara? She was the perfect distraction for him. She had always been beautiful, but not in an obvious way. More like effortless, sun-kissed skin, wild curls, long limbs that moved like she was always dancing. People were drawn to her. She had that healing energy vibe, the kind you find in Instagram influencers who burn sage and talk about moon phases. Clara had this way of slipping into people's lives like smoke. And when I was gone, she slipped right into mine. The first time I noticed something was wrong, I had just gotten back from Syria. I was sitting at our kitchen counter, still adjusting to civilian life, when I saw Nate laughing at something on his phone. "What's funny?" I asked. "Clara sent this TikTok," he said, showing me a video of her doing a yoga pose in a bikini on a paddleboard. "She's ridiculous." I laughed with him. I didn't think twice. But now I realize, it wasn't just a video, it was a breadcrumb, and there had been others. The way she'd brush past him too closely. The wine nights they had while waiting for me to FaceTime. The inside jokes I was never a part of. The fact that she knew where we kept our wine glasses better than I did. Clara used my absence like an open door. And Nate? He let her in. She didn't just betray me as a friend. She betrayed every moment we'd ever shared, every promise, every childhood memory. I once gave her my dog tags before my first deployment. She said she'd wear them until I came home safe. She gave them back to me a year later, with tears in her eyes and a bouquet of yellow roses. Now I wonder, was she already planning this? Had she already decided that my life was just a space she could occupy while I was away? The worst part wasn't the affair. It was the emotional rehearsals they'd done before it. The closeness, the secrets. The little smiles when they thought I wasn't looking. They built something behind my back, And they did it in my home, in my bed, with my child growing inside me. When I found out about the miscarriage, Nate said, "I didn't know how to help you." Clara said, "Maybe this happened for a reason." I wanted to scream, but I didn't. I filed it all away like battle intelligence, every word, every look, every lie. Because Clara and Nate weren't just cheaters. They were cowards. And cowards never see the ambush coming. That night at the gala, they stood beneath chandeliers and fairy lights, pretending to be saints. Clara gave a speech about self-love and rising from pain. Nate clapped like a proud husband. They wore their betrayal like perfume, light enough to cover, but it still lingered. But I wasn't there to expose them just yet. Not fully. I needed to build the pressure first. Let them enjoy the applause. Let them feel safe. Because when I struck, I wanted it to land where it would hurt most. Their pride, their image, and their illusion of control. The microphone in Clara's manicured hand sparkled under the golden lights of the ballroom. She stood at the center of the stage like she owned the night, all fake humility and forced gratitude. Her ivory gown hugged her body, and her bare arms stretched open like she was about to bless us all with enlightenment. Behind her, a screen played a slow montage of her yoga classes. Quotes about healing, and photos of her posing with children in underserved communities, none of which she'd ever actually volunteered for, I later learned. She began her speech with a breathy laugh. "I've come a long way," she said, voice dripping with false vulnerability. From a small-town girl with a big heart to a woman who now helps others find their center. Applause. "I've made mistakes," she continued, lowering her eyes dramatically. "I've faced pain, loss, regret, but what matters most is how we rise from it." More applause. Clara knew how to sell a story. That had always been her strength. She could spin lies into poetry and tragedy into performance. She could stand on a stage built on the backs of her victims and still look like a savior. She was wrapping up her speech when I stood up. No one noticed at first. The clapping had just started. People were smiling, wiping their eyes. Her parents looked especially moved. Ray had his arm around his wife, nodding proudly. Then my voice cut through the applause like a blade. "Let's talk about the kind of healing that starts with betrayal." The room stilled. Clara's head snapped toward me. Her smile faltered. "Bailey," she said, her voice tight. "Now's not." "No, Clara," I said, stepping forward. "Now is exactly the time." People turned in their seats. Phones came out. The sound guy hovered near the board, unsure whether to cut the mic or let it run. I walked toward the stage slowly, deliberately. "I think everyone here deserves to know what kind of woman they're applauding," I said. "The kind who dances half-naked for her best friend's husband, in her best friend's home, while that best friend was overseas, serving her country." A ripple of gasps swept through the room. Clara's face went pale. "That's not true," she said quickly. She's confused. This is personal." "Oh, it's personal, all right," I said. "You want to talk about pain and loss? I lost a child while you were playing house with my husband." A shocked murmur rose. Clara's parents were frozen in their seats. I turned to face the crowd. "I wore a uniform for 13 years, I said. I fought for people who couldn't fight for themselves. I defended freedom. And while I was doing that, this woman, my best friend, betrayed every piece of trust I gave her." I looked at Nate, who had been sitting near the front. He looked like he wanted to sink through the floor. "And him," I added, pointing at him. "The man I married. The man who vowed to wait for me, love me, support me. He didn't just break our vows. He broke me." Someone in the audience stood up, an older woman. She clapped once. Then again. It spread, scattered applause, mixed with uncomfortable silence. Clara tried to regain control. "She's having a breakdown," she said loudly. "Bailey, you're clearly not well. This isn't the place." "No, this is exactly the place," I said. "You used this stage to sell a lie. You used my pain as a springboard for your brand. So now I'm using your moment to tell the truth." I pulled a flash drive from my clutch. "This contains footage from our home security system, from the night I walked in and caught her in my robe dancing for my husband." Gasps. Real ones this time. Clara's voice rose, panicked. "That's illegal. You can't." "It's my house," I said. "My system. My footage." I handed the flash drive to the event tech, who glanced nervously at Clara, then plugged it into the projector port. "No," Clara shouted, stepping forward, but her father stood first. "Sit down," he said, his voice ice. The video played. No sound, just visuals. Clara, my living room, the robe, Nate's gaze, my entrance, her shock, and then me in uniform staring straight into the camera. The screen went black, dead silence. And then Mr. Ray stood again. "Clara," he said slowly, eyes full of something I'd never seen before, disgust. "We're leaving." "But Dad?" I said we're leaving. He turned, and Mrs. Ray followed, her hand trembling against her clutch. Nate tried to follow them, but Mr. Ray stopped and looked at him once, then shook his head. And just like that, the gala fell apart. Guests whispered, phones buzzed, people started to leave. Clara stood frozen on stage, her perfect night in ruins. I turned and walked out without another word. The storm had hit, and I hadn't even started the real war yet. The night after the gala, I sat in my car for almost 2 hours in a parking garage, staring at the steering wheel. Not driving, not thinking, just existing. The adrenaline was gone. The fire that carried me through the confrontation had burned out. All that was left was the wreckage. And I was sitting in the middle of it, numb. My hands shook. Not from fear, not from cold, from everything. I had just publicly exposed the two people who meant the most to me. I humiliated them in front of their friends, their colleagues, their families. I dropped a truth bomb into their perfect little world and walked away without looking back. And yet, it didn't feel like victory. It felt like grief. Grief for what I had lost. Grief for who I used to be. I was alone now. More alone than I had ever been on any battlefield, any foreign mission. Because there, at least, I had a team. A purpose. A chain of command. Rules. Orders. Here? Just silence. I drove home eventually, though I'm not sure how. I left the car running in the driveway, walked inside, and didn't turn on the lights. I stripped off my black dress, the same one I had worn with such confidence the night before, and let it fall to the floor. I stood in front of the mirror in my bedroom, bare and exhausted, staring at the scars on my shoulder from shrapnel in Syria. My body had been through war. My mind had survived unspeakable trauma. But this heartbreak, this betrayal, it felt like something I wasn't trained for. I collapsed onto the bed and cried. For hours. Big, ugly sobs, the kind that shake your ribs and make your throat burn. I cried for the child I lost, for the friend who became my enemy, for the man I once trusted with my life, for the life that no longer existed. And when the tears dried, the emptiness settled in like a fog. For the next few days, I didn't leave the house, I didn't answer calls, I ignored texts from Alex, from coworkers, even from my therapist. I turned off the TV, ignored the news, stayed offline. But the world didn't stop spinning just because I wanted it to. The gala video had gone viral. Someone had posted the entire confrontation online. It was everywhere: Facebook, TikTok, YouTube. People were calling it the betrayal of the year. Some were on my side. Others called me dramatic, bitter, that military chick who couldn't keep her man. And I watched it, over and over, like a punishment. I memorized every second. Clara's stunned face, Nate's silent shame, the audience's reaction. At night, it played in my dreams. During the day, it looped in my head. One morning, I woke up on the bathroom floor. I didn't remember falling asleep there. My head ached. My mouth was dry. I looked at myself in the mirror. I didn't recognize the woman staring back. She looked hollow, disconnected, a ghost in fatigues. I knew I needed help, so I called someone I hadn't spoken to in a while. Sergeant Major Alana Grant, my former superior officer, my mentor, the woman who once pulled me out of a foxhole and taught me how to fight like I belonged. She answered on the second ring. "Monroe," she said, "took you long enough." I didn't say anything at first. Then I whispered, "I'm not okay." "I know," she said, "but you will be." She drove 3 hours that same day, showed up at my door with coffee, protein bars, and a duffel bag of old training gear. "You're coming with me," she said. "Where?" "Nowhere fancy, just back to where you remember who the hell you are." And just like that, the healing began. Not with grand gestures, not with revenge, but with someone reminding me that I wasn't broken, just bruised. And bruises heal. I hadn't told anyone about the folder. Not Alana, not my therapist, not even my lawyer. I started building it the night after I found Clara and Nate in my living room, still in shock, still in uniform. At first, it was just something to do to stop myself from losing control, a coping mechanism, a way to channel my rage. But the more I dug, the more I realized there was a war behind the scenes that no one knew I was already winning. Because I had spent 13 years learning how to read people, spot patterns, and gather intelligence. And when I applied that to my own life, the pieces fell together fast. I started with Nate's laptop. He had always been careless with passwords. He thought I trusted him too much to snoop. And I did, until I didn't. There were emails, photos, screenshots, but more importantly, bank statements, unusual transfers, private accounts. Transactions under Clara's yoga business that didn't add up. Money that wasn't theirs. Money that was mine. Because what Clara and Nate didn't know was that I had inherited a substantial estate from my grandfather 2 years ago. He was a retired Air Force general who died without children, and I was his closest living relative. He left me everything. Investments, property, even offshore holdings. I never flaunted it. Never told Nate the full scope of it. Just said it was enough for retirement. But it was more than enough. I wasn't just comfortable, I was wealthy, and I had protected it all under my name. Clara's fake LLC had been siphoning small amounts from a joint account Nate once had access to. They thought it was too little to notice, too scattered to track. They were wrong. I compiled the evidence. Every transaction, every forged signature, every lie. I ran it all by a private investigator, an old contact from my Afghanistan days. His name was Vic, and he owed me his life. "Bailey," he said after reviewing the files, "you're sitting on felony-level fraud." I smiled. "Good," I said. "Then let's make sure they know that." But I wasn't done. Clara had positioned herself as a self-made success. Grants, brand deals, public donations, but what no one knew was that she had falsified the yoga certification she built her entire studio around. She had forged her credentials, photoshopped her license, and bribed a minor registrar in another state to keep her name on a fake list. I knew, because I traced the wire transfer she sent to him 3 years ago. The man eventually cracked when Vic applied some gentle pressure. I recorded everything. So now, I had her on fraud, impersonation, tax evasion, and character destruction. I still hadn't decided what to do with it. But the day I felt ready to come back to the world, I got a call. It was from Ava Reeds, CEO of an elite private security and consultancy firm in New York. A woman I'd once protected during an embassy extraction mission in Iraq. She never forgot what I did for her. Said I had ice in my veins and lightning in my hands. "You still looking for a new purpose, Monroe?" she said. "Depends," I said. "What do you have in mind?" She made an offer. Vice President of International Operations, full clearance, double salary, full relocation package. I could pick my team. I could live anywhere. And just so you know, she added, your little viral moment at the gala, it didn't hurt you. It helped. The world needs women who expose snakes, not protect them. I hesitated. Then I said, I'll think about it. That same night, I went back into my folder. I printed every document, bound them into a file, added a cover letter that read, "To the press, the public, and anyone who thinks I'm just a bitter ex-wife, here's the real story." I didn't release it yet. I held it, because power, like revenge, is best used when it's unexpected. And now? I had both. Clara and Nate thought they had broken me. But what they didn't know was that I wasn't just rebuilding. I was preparing to rise. The first time I walked into the Ava Reed's Global Security HQ in Manhattan, no one recognized me. And that was exactly what I wanted. Gone was the soldier who came home to betrayal. Gone was the woman who cried on her bedroom floor and questioned her worth. What stood in her place was someone new, someone carved from silence, fire, and sheer willpower. I wore a tailored black power suit, custom-stitched, tapered to my shoulders, sharp at every angle. No flashy jewelry, just a slim gold watch, a military pin on my lapel, and a red manicure to match my lipstick. My hair, once long and untamed, was now cut into a sleek, controlled bob. My gait, precise. My posture, unshakable. No one knew my full story as I entered that office. They just knew I had something they needed. Intelligence, strength, and discipline, with the cold composure of someone who'd seen death and survived betrayal. Ava greeted me with a grin. "God damn, Monroe," she said, rising from her chair. "You didn't just show up, you arrived." I shook her hand. "Let's get to work." In the weeks that followed, I didn't just step into a new role. I stepped into a new life. I handpicked my team, 5 elite operatives, all with unique skill sets, all vetted by me personally. We trained together, traveled together, trusted one another. No lies, no masks, just mission clarity. I was back in control, not just of operations and intel, but of myself, my emotions, my direction, and with every passing day I felt less like the woman Nate broke and more like the woman he never deserved. Still, transformation isn't just about work, it's about presence. So I gave mine an upgrade. I moved out of the house Nate and I once shared, sold it in 2 weeks flat. Every photo, every dish, every memory, gone. I bought a sleek condo in Tribeca, overlooking the river. Modern, quiet, untouchable. I hired a stylist, not because I needed one, but because I wanted to enjoy the process of becoming my own armor. No more soft cardigans or floral prints. Now it was structured blazers, heels that echoed on marble, and sunglasses that blocked out stares and sympathy alike. I was a force, and the world began to notice. The video of the gala had evolved from a viral moment to a cultural talking point. Articles labeled me as the soldier who stood up for herself. A few even reached out for interviews. I declined most. Let them wonder. Let them talk. Power lies in mystery. But I wasn't done with Clara and Nate. Not yet. I hadn't spoken to either of them since that night. Nate had tried to call once, left a voicemail mumbling about misunderstandings and regret. I deleted it without listening to the rest. Clara? She went underground. Her studio shuttered after her license scandal broke, thanks to a discreet leak from Vic. Donors pulled out, sponsors vanished. Even her carefully curated Instagram feed turned off comments. Last I heard, she was teaching private sessions in someone's guest house outside town. Poor Clara. She thought rebranding was as easy as deleting a few posts, but I had burned her credibility to the ground. And Nate? He was seen applying for a teaching position at a community college. Rumor had it, he tried dating again. The women knew who he was, and they weren't interested. I didn't even need to lift a finger anymore. Their fall was already echoing through the corners of the same internet that once admired them. And as for me, I was thriving. More focused, more powerful. More me. I learned something critical during this process. Revenge is not always about destruction. Sometimes it's about building so high that those who tried to bury you are forced to look up for the rest of their lives. It wasn't a stage this time. It was a boardroom. Tall glass walls, polished wood table, and a skyline that made you feel like you ruled the city just by sitting there. And I did. I wasn't here to beg for justice. I was here to deliver it. The quarterly ethics panel for the Women's Equity Grant Foundation had called a hearing. Apparently, they were reviewing past award recipients after receiving credible reports of fraud and misconduct. Clara had won their $50,000 grant last year for her community healing work. She used the money to stage that ridiculous empowerment gala and pay for her fake certifications. I could have let her crash and burn quietly, but some people deserve a spotlight when they fall. I walked into the building that morning with Ava Reeds by my side. She didn't have to come, but she insisted. "This isn't about revenge," she said as the elevator rose. "It's about reclaiming your space." I wore navy, clean, commanding. My heels clicked with purpose. My security clearance badge glinted under the fluorescent lights, reminding everyone in that room I belonged. Clara sat across from me at the long conference table. She looked different, smaller somehow. Her hair was flat, makeup overdone, like she'd tried too hard to hide how shaken she really was. She hadn't expected me to show up. Definitely not with documentation. And certainly not with Ava Reeds, whose name alone could silence entire rooms. The panel opened with introductions, then read the charges. Falsification of credentials, misuse of public grant funds, and breach of contractual ethical standards. Clara tried to interrupt. "This is all being blown out of proportion," she said, laughing nervously. "My paperwork is valid. There must have been a mistake." "Miss Monroe," the chairwoman said, turning to me, "you have the floor." I stood, not shaking, not rehearsing, just ready. I slid a sleek folder across the table. "Inside, you'll find verified evidence of Clara Ray's misconduct," I said. "Forged documents, bank transfers, bribed officials. I've included contact information for the registrar she paid off, as well as a sworn affidavit from the private investigator who tracked the trail." No one blinked. I kept going. The grant was used not for community outreach, but for personal branding and luxury event costs, including the Belmont Estate venue, designer gowns, and a personal stylist. I glanced at Clara. I'd recognize that stylist's work anywhere. Someone at the far end of the table stifled a laugh. I also provided a video of Miss Ray's public deception. posing as a healer while engaged in an extramarital affair with the spouse of an active duty officer, using her client community as cover for private gain. A panelist looked visibly disgusted. Another shook her head and scribbled something. Clara was breathing heavily now. She stood suddenly, knocking her chair back. "This is a witch hunt," she shouted. "She's obsessed with me. She's bitter because I found love with someone she couldn't keep." The room went dead quiet, and that's when Ava stood up. Cool, composed, cutting. "My firm has reviewed the material independently," Ava said. "We verified every detail. Miss Monroe isn't bitter, she's meticulous. She's the reason some of us are still alive. You'd do well to remember who you're talking to." Clara looked around the room, realizing for the first time that there was no one left to defend her. No Nate, no followers, no sympathy. The chairwoman cleared her throat. "We'll be suspending Miss Ray's eligibility for all current and future grant opportunities, pending formal investigation." "Thank you, Miss Monroe." I nodded once, then sat down. Clara didn't. She stood there for a few more seconds, like she was waiting for someone to speak up for her. They didn't. Security escorted her out 5 minutes later. But I stayed. Not because I needed validation, but because I wanted to watch a system that once supported her finally recognize what she really was. That evening, news of the hearing broke. The clips went viral, again. Only this time, no one criticized me. No one questioned my motives. The headlines had changed. Soldier turned whistleblower exposes fraudulent wellness guru. Yoga con artist falls from grace, thanks to decorated veteran. From betrayal to justice, Bailey Monroe rewrites her story. I didn't post about it, didn't comment. I didn't need to. My silence spoke louder than anything I could have said. And Clara's career? Finished. The real show had always been behind the scenes, and I had directed every act. I used to think strength looked like holding it all together. Like smiling through betrayal. Like keeping secrets to protect people who wouldn't do the same for you. Like walking away quietly because you didn't want to be too much, too emotional, too loud. But now I know better. Strength isn't silence. It's speaking when your voice shakes. It's standing tall when people want you to disappear. It's refusing to be the one who walks away just to make others feel comfortable. For a long time, I thought being a soldier meant I had to put the mission first, even when the mission destroyed me, even when it meant sacrificing myself over and over. But self-sacrifice without boundaries isn't loyalty, it's erasure. And I won't be erased. Not as a woman, not as a warrior, not as someone who gave everything, love, trust, years, to people who were never worthy of it. Clara and Nate didn't break me. They revealed me. They peeled back the polite version of me. The one trained to forgive, to stay quiet, to make excuses for the weak. What's left now is the real me. And she's not here to play nice. She's here to live. Because here's the truth. I'm not the woman who got cheated on. I'm the woman who turned betrayal into a blueprint, who turned heartbreak into strategy, who took the ugliest, most painful moment of her life and built an empire out of it. And if you're listening to this, if you've ever been lied to, walked out on, made to feel like you weren't enough, let me be the one to tell you. You were never the problem. You were just standing next to people too small to see your full size. You were loving people who only knew how to take. And that's not your shame. That's your proof. Your proof that your love is real. That your loyalty is real. That your heart beats with something fierce and honest and rare. But now, it's time to aim that heart inward. It's time to become your own protector. Your own witness, your own rescue mission. The world doesn't teach women how to survive the kind of pain that doesn't bleed, but it lives in us. And once you rise from that, no one can put you back in the place they built to contain you. I don't need revenge anymore, not because I've forgotten what they did, but because I've surpassed it. Their story ends where mine begins, in power, in clarity, in silence so loud it demands to be heard. So if anyone ever tells you that being soft makes you weak, remind them that velvet cuts deeper than stone when it's wrapped around steel. And if someone ever betrays you, don't just survive it. Document it. Study it. Use it. Turn it into the weapon they never saw coming. I did. And I'm just getting started.
And that wraps up today's story. Now we want to hear from you. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments, and let's see how far these stories reach. If this story moved you or gave you chills, Give it a like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories. One last thing, rate the story from 1 to 10 in the comments. Your feedback helps us bring you even better ones next time. Thanks for watching. We appreciate you being part of this storytelling journey.